Good morning everyone. Today in this video we're going to start a new topic, the Great Depression. The Great Depression was happened in 1929. Actually, in last few videos we talk about one topic, that is the rising status of US, right? So today we're going to find out why. After the First World War, US was supposed to have a booming economy in a rising status. Why? On the contrary, in 1929, it has led to the Great Depression. Firstly, we're going to do a little background check on US during the 1920s, because when we talk about the rising status of the US, it was after the First World War. This is 1919, while the Great Depression was happened in 1929. So what happened in this decade lead to a rising status to a Great Depression? Firstly, we all know that after the First World War, the US became very rich. On one hand, they were rich because they were the largest creditor in the world, right? It lent money to Britain and France during the First World War, even after the First World War, to help them recover their economies. And at the same time, they lent money to Germany to help them to pay the war reparations. Do you still remember the reparation triangle? While US was on the top, on one hand, they're collecting debts from Britain and France. On the other hand, actually, they are still lending money to Britain and France. On the other side, we have Germany. While US, they lend money to Germany to help them to pay the reparation to Britain and France, right? Actually, this kind of European recovery program was adopted by him, Charles Dawes. He was an American politician. He's the one who proposed the Dawes Plan. The Dawes Plan. The US, their economic aid to Britain and France and also Germany were all under this kind of Dawes Plan. Not only that they were the largest creditor of the world, on the other side you have to see they were the largest market at the time in the world. Many other countries, they depended on US as the major market for their products. It was because after the First World War, a lot of countries, they were greatly distracted by the war. So people there, actually, they were very poor, right? So the only place that people they were having a lot of money was in US. That is the reason why people they would like to sell their products, different products to US, because people at that place, at least they have money to buy all these products. That is the reason why after the First World War, many countries they depended on the United States as a major market for their products. For 1920s, there's another name for this time of period. The Roaring Twenties. What does it mean by the 20s? Of course, it means the 1920s. Why 1920s can be like a roaring time? Because it's a time when the booming economy happened. It is like the richest time in American history. Recently, when I checked online, I found this survey. Which era would you want to live in? And surprisingly, the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, was selected as the first time of period when people want to live in. Why? It's because, like from this photo, it's a time when people were having parties. Actually, there's a famous saying that 1920s was a long party. You can see here what you will do during the 1920s, why it's so attractive to so many people, even in nowadays. It's because, like, you can have a lot of parties, celebrate being alive. Post First World War, people flocked to the big city to drink, dance, take part in full-blown debauchery until the break of dawn. So you can see it's a time when people they were having fun. But you also need to think about one question. Why 1920s can be the time when people they can like day and night having all those parties? Why they were having so many like spare times, right? So this is a time when you need to say thanks to the high technologies. This is an age of new inventions. For example, this car Model T. This is actually the first time in history when these cars become like normal in people's lives. Like one of the 5 people in US at the time they were able to have a Model T. Of course, the traffic lights is a time when people they need traffic lights because they have more cars on the roads. And also they have TV, television, and camera, and also radio. What do you think it is? Actually, this is a washing machine. This is also a washing machine. This is a like advertisement at that time. This is a vacuum cleaner. This is a toaster, a hair dryer, a fridge. So you can see why these new inventions can be important. For example, for the housewives, at old time they had to stay at home and do all the housework, right? But now, thanks to all these high technologies, they can save a lot of time by only doing all those houseworks, right? The lifestyle of people during the era changed dramatically due to the introduction of these high technologies, such as radio, motion pictures, telephones, cars, and electricity. So it's a time when people they got more leisure time. You can see this picture. The housewives now they were able to have fun in all those clubs. Like in the theater, people they just crowded to like watch drama or movie. And also more parties, right? And also another name of the Roaring Twenties was the Jazz Age, because it saw the huge popularity of jazz music. It was played in clubs, pubs, and other public places. Now I'm going to play a video to let you see what it's like in the Roaring Twenties.
Between 1921 and 1929, the image conveyed by the United States was of a population living in the best possible society despite the prohibition and the rise of gangsterism. The industrial growth of the main economic power had never been so strong before, unashamed even. What a contrast with the previous decade marked by the Great War. The political and financial authorities drummed out the same message about confidence, durable prosperity, and well-being. Toward the end of the decade, the economic boom turned to general euphoria. The Roaring Twenties were also the days of the first Miss America elections, the first Oscar ceremonies, the first musicals, all set to a jazz background.
To call the 1920s, the period before the Depression, to call that the age of jazz, the age of prosperity, the Roaring Twenties, was to distort the picture.
Consumer culture blossoms in America. Installment credit buying blossoms in America. It's the age of the flapper, of bootleg gin, of jazz. It's also a period of enormous excitement about the stock market, where all kinds of ordinary people, not just the stock market professionals who'd always participated in Wall Street, but ordinary folk began to see Wall Street as a place to play, to grow rich quickly, a place that was largely risk-free. Therefore, the 20s in America is a period in which Wall Street, for the first time in its history, is associated with play culture, with getting drunk, with sexual abandon, with consumer delights. Wall Street becomes a part of that larger way of life.
America discovered a passion for stock exchange dabbling. In 5 years, stock market prices were multiplied by 4. The Dow Jones Index went from 100 to nearly 400. Such a rise seems incomprehensibly enormous in view of the actual economic situation. Dazzled and fascinated by the promise of easy money on the New York Stock Exchange, or Wall Street as it is known, Americans turned out their pockets. In 1929, $2 billion were invested on the stock market.
So here I've marked some notes from the video about the features for the stock market in 1920s. For example, firstly, it's a time not only professionals, also a lot of ordinary people. That means people who don't really have those professional knowledge about the stock market or economic principles. So these people now, they began to see Wall Street as a place, firstly to play, to grow rich quickly, and also they think the stock market is a place that is risk-free. It's easy way for you to get rich without any risk. And also this is the first time in history the Wall Street associated with the play culture. Just like here, right? People found that the stock market is a place where it's risk-free and also at the same time easy and quick way to become rich. So with the booming economy, the stock market, the stock price were rising by the day. These investors and ordinary people, they invested heavily in the stock market. At the same time, crisis arose. On 29th of October, the Wall Street stock market in the US crashed. That is the Great Crash or the Wall Street crash. So we're going to explain why. How these features I marked from those videos has led to the crisis and the depression of the US market. So how this kind of culture, this kind of play culture can lead to the crisis for the stock market in US. Firstly, you need to know what is a stock. I'm going to show you a video from TED to tell you about some basic information of a stock and the stock market.
In the 1600s, the Dutch East India Company employed hundreds of ships to trade gold, porcelain, spices, and silks around the globe. But running this massive operation wasn't cheap. In order to fund their expensive voyages, the company turned to private citizens, individuals who could invest money to support the trip in exchange for a share of the ship's profits. This practice allowed the company to afford even grander voyages, increasing profits for both themselves and their savvy investors. Selling these shares in coffee houses and shipping ports across the continent, the Dutch East India Company unknowingly invented the world's first stock market. Since then, companies have been collecting funds from willing investors to support all kinds of businesses. And today, the stock market has schools, careers, and even whole television channels dedicated to understanding it. But the modern stock market is significantly more complicated than its original incarnation. So how do companies and investors use the market today? Let's imagine a new coffee company that decides to launch on the market. First, the company will advertise itself to big investors. If they think the company is a good idea, they get the first crack at investing and then sponsor the company's initial public offering, or IPO. This launches the company onto the official public market, where any company or individual who believes the business could be profitable might buy a stock. Buying stocks makes those investors partial owners in the business. Their investment helps the company to grow, and as it becomes more successful, more buyers may see potential and start buying stocks. As demand for those stocks increases, so does their price, increasing the cost for prospective buyers and raising the value of the company's stocks people already own. For the company, this increased interest helps fund new initiatives and also boosts its overall market value by showing how many people are willing to invest in their idea. However, if for some reason a company starts to seem less profitable, the reverse can also happen. If investors think their stock value is going to decline, they'll sell their stocks with the hopes of making a profit before the company loses more value. As stocks are sold and demand for the stock goes down, the stock price falls, and with it, the company's market value. This can leave investors with big losses, unless the company starts to look profitable again. This seesaw of supply and demand is influenced by many factors.
So now from that TED video, you know more about a stock and the stock market, right? I think there's one thing that you have to remember from that video, that is what causes stock price to change. You have to see that the stock price, they change every day by the market force. Market force means the demand and supply. That means how many people want to buy the stock, how many people want to sell the stock. If more people, they want to buy a stock, then sell it, then the price moves up. Conversely, if more people, they wanted to sell a stock than buy it, there would be greater supply than demand, and the price would fall. And also, just now we mentioned one important feature for the 1920s stock market. That's a time when not only the investors, also when the ordinary people, they want to play in the stock market, right? So you can see here we have a color in blue and color in red, while they were having different type of investing style. Let's try to identify them, okay? So for the blue side, stock is a piece of a company. That means if you think that company have potential to grow, of course you're going to invest in that company, right? But on the other side, they think it's just a piece of paper. That means their decision to buy a stock or not, or which stock to buy, is not based on that company's name. It's not based on the future of that company. It only may be based on some rumor, maybe just based on when some stocks has growing fast. And when they decide to buy stocks because of, for the blue side, fundamental analysis. So for the fundamental analysis, you can see here that they have different kinds of factors, like will have great impacts on like the investors' decisions on buying or selling the stock. For example, the company earning, whether it's earning money or not, the publicity, whether the policy and the earning and all the data relevant to the company is transparent to the public, the potential of that industry, if the government, they have some like privilege or bonus policies for that industry, the fundamental economic data of a country, if that country or where the industry is located have like potential to grow, like the war conflict. Of course, it is like in a peaceful time, it's easier for an industry to grow, right? Or it based on, sometimes can based on some rumor, like some company is changing something, changing some policy, or individual lifestyle. You have preference on some environment related industry, so maybe you will focus on those stocks, or the weather. For example, if your industry is greatly relevant to the weather, of course it will have great impacts on your decision making. But on the other side, like any other reasons, actually mostly I think rumors, because they won't have a very rational fundamental analysis. Next, investing profits come from dividends, the growth of companies, or the difference between buy price and sell price. So the only thing for the red side to think is to buy in a low price while sell in a high price, so they can gain the money, right? So the holding period is like much longer for the investment, because you are seeing the potential of that company. You're not seeing like a quick or easy money. But on the other side, for the red side, it's more like a shorter time of period while they're trying to just for money. It's more like a gambling here, right? So this is like investor versus the speculator. Investor is more like a people who will invest with some national and fundamental analysis, while on the other side for the speculator, it's more of like a gambler when they just like make decisions not based on basic analysis, but based on some like rumors or other things. So at that time, while we have more and more ordinary people who want to invest in stock market, do we have more investor or more speculator? Actually, for those ordinary people, they don't really have knowledge. They don't really like capable to do those fundamental analysis, right? Because those information at that time is not that transparent, not like nowadays you can check everything online, right? At that time, you need to have your expertise and have your personnel to help you to reach all those knowledge. But at that time, there's no way for these ordinary people to get those information. That is the reason why most of their decisions were made from rumor, were made from the trend. So let's see what happened during the time. In the year leading up to 1929, the stock market offered the potential for making huge gains in wealth, right? People bought shares with the expectation of ordinary people, right? Mostly ordinary people. They bought share with the expectation of making more money, making easy money, right? So as share price rose, people start to borrow. Even some of the people, they will borrow money for the investment because they think all the things in the stock market is risk-free. So maybe they don't get a lot of money, but they want to gain a huge profit. That is the reason why they even borrow money from the bank to invest the stock market. So the market got caught up in a speculative bubble. What is speculative bubble? You can see here we have the speculator, right? So when in the stock market, more and more investment were based on the speculation, that is the speculative bubble. So shares keep rising and people, they felt they would continue to do so. So the problem was that stock price became divorced from the real potential earnings of the share price. It is like a very healthy stock market. The stock price should be showing the potential earning of a share price. But now you can see one problem is they're divorced, right? The stock price is too high, which is not really showing the real price. So this is a speculative bubble. So also the price was not driven by economic fundamentals. That means it's not because of, for example, the company earnings or like the potential of the market or any like new government policy which is good for the development of the industry. Instead, it's all because all those ordinary people or the speculator, they just bet on some of the stocks. When someone said some stocks maybe like have potential to earn a huge amount of money. So it was not driven by the economic fundamentals. Instead, it was driven by rumors, right? But the optimism of the investors or exuberance, just the same as optimism, because people, they think it's risk-free, it's easy money to make, right? So of course, no matter which stock I'm invested in, the only result will be gaining money, right? But this is actually not the story. There's no investment that is risk-free, okay? So it has led to some irrational investment. So by October 1929, when some companies, they posted disappointing results. So actually at the time, one important problem has caused in US, that is the overproduction. They were able to produce a lot of different products, but actually they don't have a huge population to consume all those products. And also because all other countries is after the First World War, right? So all the European countries or Asian countries, they were not able to consume these products from US because it's still lack of money. This is the reason why overproduction can be like a huge problem in US. So some companies, they posted disappointing results. On October 34th, some investors started to feel this would be a good time to cash in on their profits. So when people cash in, that means people, they were selling their stock shares, right? So when people, they want to sell the stock and buy it, the price would fall. This is a time when the price of the stock market start to fall. Share prices began to fall and panic selling. Panic selling means now these people, they find out just like this, right? The speculator, they don't really know any fundamental analysis. when they find out some of the investors, they were selling their share, and some of the people, they are talking about the decreasing economy and some like overproduction problems. This is a time when they start to find out this, they have to sell those shares before it's too late. It's already too late, right? Caused price to fall sharply on October the 29th, which is a Black Tuesday. Share price fell by 40 billion in a single day. You can see it's 40 billion. How much was the reparation for Germany? It's only 6.6 billion pounds, right? That means just in one day, the share price has fell like how many times of the reparations of Germany for the First World War. So by 1930, the value of the shares had fallen by 90%, only remained 10% of the value. The bull market had been replaced by a bear market. A bull market means a market that is increasing because the horns of the bull is pointing up, right? So it means an increasing development. While on the other hand, the bear market means a decreasing stock market. It's because while bear is using its claws, it always points down. So that's why when it decreases, it was called a bear market. So this is the Wall Street crash. After the crash, of course, it's like a sad time. A lot of like people, they heavily invested in the market. They even borrow money from the market. But now only 10% of the value remained. That's the reason why a lot of people, they commit suicide. There was a wave of suicides in the New York's financial district. It said that the clerks of one hotel even started asking new guests if they need a room for sleeping or jumping. I don't know if it's like true, but it is really a sad time. So now I'm going to show you a video about the impacts of the Great Crash. After the video, you need to write down your answers on your worksheets. What are the impacts of the Great Crash?
October 24th, 1929, disaster on Wall Street. The stock market crashed on a day that would go down in history as Black Thursday. Panicked investors ordered their brokers to sell their stocks at any price. Thousands of accounts were wiped out as a record number of shares, nearly 13 million, were traded. The stocks of major companies such as General Electric and Montgomery Ward plummeted. During the first 3 hours, stock valuations shrank over $11 billion. Stories of financial ruin and suicides were rampant. Although there was a rapid recovery that same afternoon, the crash started a panic which undermined vital confidence in the economy. As the market declined, the economy slid downward as a whole into the Great Depression. Within 3 years, 12 to 15 million Americans, about 1/4 of the labor force, was unemployed. And business productivity hit its lowest level. From 1929 to 1932, 11,000 banks, 44% of the total, failed in the United States. And nearly $2 billion in deposits evaporated. There were several theories about what caused the stock market and the economy to spiral downward. The bull market had been going strong through 1928, but prices had gone too high. The market was out of touch with economic reality as business activity slowed and profits declined. Even though the Federal Reserve tried to control interest rates, commercial banks and corporations were still lending money for speculation. As nations recovered from World War I, thousands of foreign investors had sold off their interest and began investing in their own countries. And then there was the intangible yet very real factor of psychology, economists predicting disaster, and the contagious panic of investors on Black Thursday who said, sell at any price. It ended up being a very high price indeed. The nation's economy would soon follow the stock market, spiraling down into a depression that would last well into the late 1930s.
So let's check the impacts of the Great Crash together from the video. Firstly, the problem is unemployment, while 25% of the labor force was unemployed. This is because a lot of like business or company, because the stock price was too low, so they closed down. So when these business they close down, of course people they get unemployed, right? And then next, from 1929 to 1932, 11,000 banks, that is 44% of total, closed. On one hand, it's because it's a time when banks they lend money for people to invest in the stock market. So when the value decreased 90%, the people they can't really pay back the banks, so some banks they bankrupt, right? And also it's because this is a time when some of the banks get bankrupt and people they start to distrust the banks. So people they keep withdrawing their money from the banks. That is the reason why more and more banks close down. And also factories shut down. This caused low business productivity. Factories means industries productivity, right? And also because a lot of factories shut down, that's the reason why the government of US they try to protect their local industry. So to protect local industry, one obvious policy now is to impose high tariffs on all foreign goods, right? So other European countries followed. Free trade stopped. So what should the US do when they need money? Firstly, let's see this picture together. Actually, this picture was not took from US, not from the Wall Street. It was took from London. So you can see, was the British economy good at that time as reflected in this photo? I would say no, right? Because the man in the picture knew 3 trades and spoke 3 languages, but he had been unemployed for 3 months already. So it can be seen that the British economy was bad at that time. We only have Wall Street crash, right? So why the British economy was also crashed? It's because the Wall Street crash of 1929 turned into the Great Depression that spread across the world. So during the Great Depression, the US dollar and many European currencies were devalued. Factories shut down, banks closed, and millions of people were out of work. Moreover, inflation was serious. So again, those 2 problems, right? Unemployment rate, high unemployment rate, and inflation. You have to see at that time, US played a leading role in the economic development of the world. This kind of great crash or Wall Street crash touched off a serious financial crisis that turned into the Great Depression that spread across the world. So after the First World War, the European and Japanese economies relied too heavily on American capital. So therefore, when the US was hit by a recession, which was the Wall Street crash, it withdrew capital and cut down their imports. And also, they cut down their supports. Remember, at the start of this video, we talked about the Dawes Plan, right? They cut the Dawes Plan, of course. So similar economic crisis occurred in Europe and Japan. So, what should the US do when they need money? Right after the First World War, the US, they were the largest creditor, right? And US was the biggest market of a lot of countries. So now, what should they do? Of course, firstly, you are the creditor. So, they demanded for repayment. Since US was the major creditor and financier of the post-war Europe, they demanded the repayment of loans. So let's get back to the reparation triangles. Firstly, right after the First World War, according to the Dawes Plan, US gives support and loans to Germany and Britain and France. So now, on one hand, they cut these loans, right? They cut all the financial support, all the economic aid. And on the other hand, they need Britain and France to pay back their war debts. So firstly, no loans for Germany. So when Germany, they try to pay those reparations to Britain and France by using the loans from USA now, like they were not able to pay the reparation anymore. While on the other side, Britain and France, since USA has cut their support, and also ask them to pay back their war debts. This is the reason why Britain and France actually they urge Germany to pay their reparations. The result is, while Britain and France and Germany, their relationship become really bad. And also, who suffered the most under this triangle? Of course, Germany. Because on one side, they need to rebuild their country, and they were asked to pay for the reparations. At the old time, they still have loans from US to reconstruct their country to pay the reparation. Now, they have nothing to pay, right? As for Britain and France, at least they can still ask for reparations. And also, they impose high tariffs on all the foreign goods. At the old times, it was the major market. Now, when they impose high tariffs, all these products, they were not able to sell to America, so no one is buying these products. And of course, it led to great depression to all these countries. For example, you can see the UK unemployment rate is like increasing, right? Increasing just like what they were having in US. So this is the homework for this video. We're going to check the answers for this part next Thursday via YouTube Live. See you next time.